it again. Fulham needed a goal scorer. It seems like they found one.
Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back. It's meant to be an episode of After Dark tonight. Instead, it's slightly after lunch. We're here to discuss Fulham playing against Nottingham Forest off the back of a good win in the FA Cup through to the fifth round. Let's get straight into it. With us today, we have Elton. How are we going, Dad?
I'm fine, thank you. Is there any chance that we could just release this after dark and then people won't be too confused, or is that confusing?
I think we'll do no, we'll release it after lunch and call it After Dark and then re-release it after dark. After Dark, unedited, XXX. Yeah, no, we'll be...
Sure.
Yeah. Skibby, how are we going today? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. And I do take the responsibility of why it's not After Dark, so... sorry everyone.
It was, like I said, we should really be calling this one the Valentine's Day Massacre because our availability has been absolutely ravaged the night before Valentine's. Guys, it's been, I guess, it feels like a quiet week with an FA Cup fixture, especially as we're kind of used to them being midweek and seeing it on the Saturday. A good win against Wigan, kind of an expected victory. Let's sort of wrap it up, seeing as we did talk about it briefly last time, but Skibby, your thoughts on the win? A lot of rotation in the squad, a lot of interesting to see Silva trying quite a few different things as well. We saw Josh King out on the wing and Muniz get a start. What were your thoughts overall on that fixture and the result?
I think it's just that word rotation is very key. And I think when you think of previous years, the rotation that we could do was not strong enough for cup competitions. And now we're into a position where, we can rest, we say we played second string and we rested players. So with Raul Jimenez getting rested, that means Muniz comes in. We rested ML Smith-Rowe, so Andreas Pereira comes in. And, it's really, really strong. And, yeah, we looked really comfortable. I think still some real questions about goalkeeper. And I know that we're not the only one. I think even... I think it was Forest, actually. They had to sub their goalkeeper after 45 minutes in their cup game just because he wasn't performing very well. I don't think it was injury-related. And
I think it was 30 minutes. In fact, he got dragged, yeah.
Was it? Wow. And I think that's probably the similar situation that we're in, where on the pitch we look fantastic. The players coming in, with the rotation, like you say, Josh King, I think, can play anywhere in midfield at this point. He can play central, wide, and he can always have an impact. Sessegnon is really comfortable and probably putting in his best performances at left back and can play further forward. And if we were to draw another sort of championship side, I'd still feel really comfortable with our second string outfield players. But that being said. Sorry, my everything just froze. I thought I was going to die out there. But that being said, goalkeeper is still the big question for me with Stephen Bender. He just doesn't look comfortable. He just seems to spill when he shouldn't be spilling and just making some sort of simple mistakes, which give me kind of... I want to like him, I really do. But I think now, going from here on out, a really great performance, but I think from a team perspective, but we have to be starting sort of Leno in the cup if we want to make sure that we prioritise it and go further forward, as I think a lot of fans would like to prioritise as well.
Yeah, Dad, I mean, we saw it last time we went on a bit of a cup run. The early rounds, we play some of those teams in the lower divisions. There is pretty much a full rotation, and we've seen that with Bender starting and quite an obvious full rotation so far. With us getting Man United in the draw for the next round, do you agree that it's time to all of a sudden put in the first team and play the strongest 11 to actually give the cup a fair tilt this season?
Well, turn it around the other way and say, if we put the Wigan starting lineup out against Man United, how would we do? And I think everyone would agree that we'd probably get thumped. Not least, as Skibby articulated very well, we would have a big problem in goal. And so I think we're only 2 or 3 fixtures off the big one. So absolutely, and particularly since we've drawn a Premier League team who will surely get up for a fixture against us, because aren't we their bogey team just about? Just about. Well,
I think
we
you got to
we
beat
don't
them
beat
more
them.
often to be a bogey team.
I know, but we kind of piss them off, and we do ourselves short when really we get ourselves into very good positions. What I mean is that they won't be taking us lightly. No way in the wide world, and they wouldn't put a second string team out against us, I'm sure. Absolutely, I don't know what private chat Marco's had with Bender, and to a lesser degree Cess, because I think he did himself proud. Actually, I think he did himself no harm last weekend, and I think given the fact that we are a little bit light on the wings, I think he's a contender for something a bit different. Certainly off the bench if we need him. A lot depends on Williams' fitness, but he can't be ready to be slotted in either. So, we're not short because we've got a Wobie and we've got Adama, but I think Cess is emerging as a decent option on the wing, if not at left back. He's not going to displace Robinson, but on the wing, I think he's interesting. Look, big problem with Bender. I don't want to dump on the guy too hard. I think it's actually unfair blaming him for the team's predicament. He's just a bloke. It's not like he was playing Premier League or Champions League and he suddenly dropped off. He hasn't proven himself. We have just failed to get a proper replacement. And I think it's very unfair to be dumping on Bender, who, to be fair, made a lot of mistakes, made a worldie look even better by sort of giving up halfway through the shot coming across the box. Is that unfair? Maybe not. And I've heard some commentary about the fact that even that great save that he did, he picked it up pretty late and made it look a bit more spectacular than it probably needed to be, which is probably unfair. But look, as I said, I don't actually want to dump on the guy. We need to get a life together and get a better keeper to replace or back up Leno. The one guy I do feel a bit sorry for after last Saturday is Harrison Reed. He had a pretty ordinary game and he really needs some minutes, and I'm glad he got the opportunity because he's pretty rusty, and I feel like he could be called to duty. And so other than that, I'm really not about analysing the starting lineup and how we performed and how the first half was a bit disappointing. Come on, he made 10 changes. We got the job done. We're through to the next round. That's all really we should be caring about. And he grabbed the opportunity to rest some players, try a few things out. You've got to say that Muniz getting 2 goals was a great success. I don't know that he displaces Raul because I think Silva's got it pretty clear in his mind that Muniz is a better guy off the bench, even if he might be coming into some form, which is probably a little early to say. But you look, he looks good. He looks hungry, looks sharp. I still don't think he's going to start. And I think it was a missed opportunity for Smith Rowe last weekend, unfortunately. Pereira had a good one, looked really good. But it's still not happening, and I'm still worried about that one.
Yeah, look, I think for me, the biggest impressors were Cess by far. I think at the very start of the season, I was very worried that we just didn't have any kind of left back backup for Robinson. Definitely not at the same level as Robinson, but those first handful of appearances from Cess, I thought, he just doesn't have it in him. And it was really a shame because, he's such a loved player within the fan base. Everyone wants to see him do well. The last couple of appearances he's made have been really impressive. And we're starting to almost see that Cess of old, which is actually quite exciting to have a player like that come off the bench. And the ball in for Muniz's goal, admittedly, Muniz does fairly well to finish. I'd say probably possibly could have done better, and maybe the keeper's actually just got a bit flat-footed there. But it's a superb ball in from Cess, and that's the kind of thing that actually we sometimes miss from Robinson. If Robinson was putting in crosses like that over and over again, he'd have 20 assists this season. He gets into such good positions, but often is slightly lacking with the final ball, which is a weird thing to say for someone who's got 10 Premier League assists so far this season. But it's almost like if you combined Cess and Robinson into a single player, they would be probably one of the world's best left backs at this stage. And it's nice to see Cess actually finding some form. And I feel like we can have a little bit more faith in the squad depth now. I remember always worrying that at left back we were really short, and now it feels not so much. Like I feel like if we had an injury to Robinson, it would be a shame, but it wouldn't be the end of the world like I thought it would have been probably 10 weeks ago.
Do you really think, Jack, do you really think that against a Premier League team, Cess is ready to actually step in for Robinson if required at left back?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely be happy with him stepping in. I think going forward, he would offer not quite as much as Robinson does, but he'd offer a different style of play as a left back. Defensively, I think he's probably he loses out because he lacks the speed that Robinson does, and I think Robinson's speed actually makes up for his defending on occasions. I don't think he's the best one-on-one defender. And I think Cess also isn't the best one-on-one defender. So I would be fine with him stepping in. I don't think we're going to hit the same levels if we have Robinson in the team compared to Cess. But yeah, look, in terms of a backup, it's a perfectly fine backup option. I'll be more than happy with that going forward. Look, at the end of the day, I think you touched on it as well when you wrapped it up. You just have to do what you have to do in these cup games. It doesn't really matter how you get through to the next round, especially when you're rotating the squad so heavily. Just get to the next round. If we'd come up against another championship team and got a little bit lucky in this round, then yes, you can continue to rotate a little. Now we need to take it seriously. Taking on Man United, you have to put out the best team that you possibly can and make sure you get through to the next round because it's an open competition this year. There's going to be a few ties in the next round that have fairly, well, I wouldn't say easy because it's never easy, but what is it, the quarterfinals, if we get past Man United, and there's going to be probably a handful of championship teams still floating around. Once you get to the semis, anything can happen from there, and I feel like this year is feeling good. We're comfortable in the league. We can rotate. We can actually have, utilize our good squad depth, and it's exciting. So on to the next round for Fulham, and I'm excited to see how we go against Man United because I think we're good enough to beat them.
Yep. You've already bookmarked a flight, haven't you, Jack?
Bookmarked my flight for the FA Cup final. Yes, please. If we get there, it has to happen. I'll work out a way to do it somehow, but let's talk about the game coming up this weekend. Before we do, I'll just put another mention out there about the Discord. Please do check it out. Links in our bios all over our socials. A great place to talk all things Fulham at all the time. You'll also be able to follow the games live through the Discord. Don't ask the details, but you'll be able to see all the action. Let's leave it there. Skibby, Forest this weekend. This is a Forest side who are absolutely flying. I don't personally understand it. Give me your thoughts on Forest's season so far and maybe why you think they're doing as well as they actually are.
Why is probably easier to tell you the meaning of life, to be honest, because I have genuinely not a Scooby. They remind me of... Do you remember Hull City, I would say, in around sort of 2008, I think it was? They were sitting like third in the Premier League with Giovanni from Man City. and no one knew why they were doing so well, but they were there, and it just feels like the same kind of thing. When I watched Forest, obviously the first time I watched Forest was the game against us at the City Ground, and I thought they sat off. I thought they didn't really have any intent. They gave us a lot of the possession. I think we had some chances. They had loose chances. Nothing. It was comfortable. But, I think we scored a penalty in the end. I think it was a Raul Jimenez penalty, which gave us a 1-0 win at the City Ground. And then, as the season went on, it turned out that we were the only team to beat them at home for a while. And I thought, that's really bizarre. And then I watched them again, and it's just this counter-attacking play. I mean, they've got Murillo in the middle of defence, who is a very good player. I don't know how they got him or where they got him from. Obviously, Gibbs White doing everything he can sort of to create. And then everything kind of comes from the wings, because Chris Wood, for me, is barely a 10-goal-a-season striker, I think, in the Premier League. And that's generous. But, he's already hit that kind of mark before the halfway mark. And then scores a hat-trick against Brighton. Yeah, I just think... And I was watching that Brighton game, because obviously... My mum is a Brighton fan, so I keep tabs on them. And it just seemed to be more of a Brighton mishap than a Forest demolishing. So, yeah, it was 7-0, but, it didn't take a genius to work out that the young lad for Brighton, Hinshelwood, was the defensive mid, and he was just overrun. And for some reason, no one plugged the gap. So he was trying to sweep in front of the back four. And as we've seen from Brighton against us, against many a team, their keeper is very dodgy at passing it out from the back. And they were just being overrun in that kind of area where Gibbs White and the sort of wingers love to cut in. I think it's Ilanga and, well, sometimes it's Hudson-Odoi. I think that one changes on a sort of a match-by-match. But then what they're doing is just getting the ball into the 6-yard box. They're just getting really pacey wingers, getting right down to the byline, pull it back to Chris Wood, and he just does the rest. He's good in the air. I think he's got the most headed goals this season. And yeah, it's almost... It's going to sound like I'm a discredit to Forest, but every time I've seen them, it's always been the opposition just looks worse, and they just look like almost like barely a Premier League team in this instance. But fair play. They just keep grinding out these 1-0 wins. And it's back to that old famous phrase from Sir Alex Ferguson. Strikers will win you matches, but defences will win you titles. And at the moment, Forest have a really good defence. And even their keeper's been making some absolute blinding saves. I think I saw the game with them. It's going to sound like I'm more of a Forest fan. I've watched Forest so much this season. But watched Forest against Liverpool, where I think they ran out, I want to say, a 1-0 win or a 2-1 win, and their keeper was just save after save after save, and they were getting the goal peppered. But yeah, it's a bizarre scenario, and I mean, would I love Fulham to be in that position? Absolutely. You can't doubt it, and it's what really annoys me about Forest is that all they talk about is the Champions Leagues, European Cups that they won back in sort of the late 70s, where probably 3/4 of their fan base was never born. But, before the game, when I went to the City Ground, they just show it on the screens of all these goals that no one's ever seen live because none of them were born. But it was really bizarre. But what's annoying me now is that they're now going to potentially repeat that. Not by winning the Cup, that would be way too far, but the fact that they're going to potentially qualify, and they're in a very good stance of qualifying for the Champions League, it leaves me a bit of a sick taste in my mouth at the moment, which is horrendous. But hey, fair play to them. They're there, but how they're there, I couldn't tell you.
Agree. And Dad, I guess a more general question around the way Forest have performed this season and the work they've done in the transfer market as well. Do you think it's a bit of a blueprint for Fulham and the way Fulham should be run when you look at Forest and how well they've done in the transfer market, how well they've done in securing a very, a top-level manager, continually grinding out results against bigger teams, something that Fulham have struggled with over the last couple of years. Is it a sort of blueprint you think we should be looking to replicate, or are you happy with the way that Fulham are, I guess, aiming to slowly build to that point rather than sort of break FFP rules and speed their way there?
I was just about to say,
You
before you
know
answer that,
I'm
what
not.
is the blueprint? Tell me the
The
blueprint.
blueprint is to just ignore the rules completely,
No.
accept a few point penalty, and then move on.
Well, I'll turn around and answer your second question. Your first question first, actually. It's interesting that I think, as Fulham fans, perhaps what annoys us most about what's happening at Forest is not what they're doing on the pitch, is more about how their fans are sort of reacting. It would be. Can you imagine if it was Brentford? It would just be horrendous. It would just be so horrendous. But to be fair to Forest, they don't have a top 6 or top 5 squad in terms of quality and money spent. Well, they've spent some money on players, no question about that. But it's not Liverpool level or even Newcastle level for me. But they surely must be winning the trophy for the best execution this season. Has to be, right? I mean, they are, fairly simple plans, like you say. It's counter-attacking, and they do it really well. They don't concede goals. They're very, very, very solid defensively. Don't score that many goals, but they always score goals. And so it's pretty simple stuff. And you got to give credit to them. They're actually doing it very, very well and collecting a lot of points along the way. So, I can only be somewhat jealous of what they're achieving, because we all know if not for a few pretty unfortunate results, we could be in a similar kind of position. Nevertheless, is it a blueprint, or am I happy that we're not spending aggressively? What do you reckon? I think my real problem is that it's like playing poker with really good cards, but you just don't have the balls. Even though you've got the money, you've been burnt, and you just don't have the balls because you just don't want to lose. And so you play it safe. You've got a Marco Silva, very, very capable manager. He's not only a capable manager, but he's proven to be capable. He's got an okay squad. He's excelling. We're having a very, very good season. Let's be realistic, points-wise. But everyone knows and everyone feels we could be doing better. And he does lack a bit of quality, which I think would allow Silva to execute better. He's got the plans. He's got far more sophisticated plans in terms of how he wants to go about playing his football. He's multi-dimensional. He's proven that. We've got a few ways that we can do it. And imagine if we just had maybe 4 players of the next level in key positions. You just, I don't want to use the own goal metaphor, but you just stop tripping yourself up, and those little, half opportunities in games, you just put them away and you put them to bed because you've got quality, and that's the frustration. So, if we had a wealthy set of owners but a shitty manager, and a bit of a shitty squad, I wouldn't be that surprised or frustrated that they weren't spending big, because that's how you can get yourself into trouble if you don't have much of a basis. But we do have a very good basis, and so I'm still surprised. I'm not buying the FFP constraints. I think we've got money to spend. I'm not that frustrated. I'm not massively frustrated with the January window. I'm not that surprised. But it tells a really big story when the manager defends the owners and the club by saying that, we went after players and we couldn't get them, and there's no point adding players to the squad if they don't add quality. But we've actually got a couple of really sizable problems which are exposing us, and we didn't sort it out. And that, I think, screams the loudest for me about a lack of ambition.
Yeah, I mean, I'd debate that there were issues that needed sorting out. I think there's definitely areas where we could have strengthened. I think
right back, Jack, right back, for example. And I even understand all the problems that no one wants to be third in line for one. Stanley's not even injured.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bigger conversation at that point where, as Silver has said, and as other managers have said, I can't remember who I saw talking about it. Could have been Graham Potter or someone talking about it, and basically saying there's a lot of factors at play in January that make it hard to sign players. You want to sign players, but you've got to actually make that happen. It's always last minute as well. No one's really chasing someone. Trying to sign someone in January that they've been tracking for 3 or 4 months. In the summer, you actually start tracking people in like April, May, and eventually lock them away in August. It's very different in January. This is last minute. It's quickly shit. Let's contact as many agents as we can and try and find a right back. I understand why that didn't get plugged, and Silver said he wanted to plug it, couldn't make it happen. I accept that. I don't feel like we can actually justify having to sign another striker, which is a position that people were disappointed we didn't actually chase after, because we've got 2 strikers who are scoring goals in the Premier League for us. So I understand why that's not actually like something that we were really pushing hard for. I think that's something that you save until summer, but we're 9th in the table. We've scored 36 goals already this season. We've got 2 strikers who are scoring goals. We've got wingers who are scoring goals fairly regularly as well. Like it just doesn't feel like something that I was disappointed that we didn't sign more players in January. But at the same time, I totally understand.
What about a keeper?
I'm one of the very few people who thinks Bender is fine as a backup keeper. If Leno breaks his leg, I know. If Leno breaks his leg, we're screwed. But to be honest, if we had even a slightly better backup keeper than Bender, we'd be screwed anyway, and we'd be saying the same thing. I don't think... Well, okay, here's a stat for you. The expected goals against for Fulham so far this year are 28. We've actually conceded 32. Leno's not having the best season of his career, especially not his best season since he's been at Fulham. I don't think Bender is going to make that big a difference. We don't see Leno making the kind of point-winning performances that we've seen from him over the last couple of years. We're actually winning games not off the back of Leno heroics. I think it was last season or the season before when Leno was basically the top keeper in the league, outperforming the expected goals conceded by, like, I think it was 15 by the end of the season, something ridiculous. And at that point you go, that is making the difference. I don't think we're at that point now. And I feel like if Bender had to play in goal, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I agree it wouldn't be ideal, but I don't think we're going to be sliding down the table and all of a sudden getting in a relegation scrap because we've got our backup keeper there. We've got a good defence in front of the keeper. And actually, I'd say a lot of the goals Leno's conceded have been down to mistakes from Bassey, Anderson, Diop. I don't think Bender would have made much of a difference in any of those goals that we've conceded this season. I just feel like it's not... I would love to have a better backup keeper, but it's definitely not like a real worry for me. Everyone keeps harping on about it. And I'm just, like you said, I used to play as a goalkeeper and I thought I was pretty good at it as well. And I don't see Bender making any massive blunders. There's a few nerves there, but I've seen much worse keepers at Fulham than Bender.
It's also the bigger picture in my eyes. It's, we talk about Alex Borto in the under-21s? Is he deemed to be our number 2 going forward, and Bender is just a 500k stopgap until
or Ashby
Borto
Hammond,
gets
for example,
or
like
Ashby Hammond? We've got some lads out on loan, haven't we? So you've got a double-edged sword, right? I see a lot of people going, "Oh, Silva never uses the youth. He never brings in blah X, Y, Z." But at the same time, if we bring in another keeper, like I know, if I had my way, because I love to dream, I'd bring in Trafford for number 2, and for Leno to then pass the baton when Leno is like 35, 36. But
I think that's got to be the way to do it for sure. Is you bring in a keeper who is actually your future number 1, and Bender's not that keeper, and so I understand the frustration there in that you want a future number 1 sitting on the bench, but there's not that many great young keepers who would be happy to have a couple of seasons on the bench, unless you go and try and pick up someone out of the Championship and hope that they're going to improve to the same. But that's kind of what we did with Bender. We picked him up off Swansea, and you kind of hope that he will eventually be ready to play in the Premier League. But I mean, Trafford's a very good goalkeeper. You kind of need, like Southampton get relegated and you pick up Ramsdale maybe. I don't know how old Ramsdale is now, but
he's got to be in his late 20s.
He actually is kind of unofficially the best goalkeeper in the league this season. Southampton should have conceded 64 goals on XG, and they've only conceded 54. He's got the biggest differential of any keeper in the league this season. So that's the kind of keeper I'd be looking at going, you come in, actually give some competition, similar to what you see at West Ham with Areola and Fabianski, where they kind of share the role. We're looking for a genuine backup, and it's hard to find a good keeper as a genuine backup.
Yeah.
But
no,
that's a keeper tangent. But in terms of the stats, when we were talking about Forest, I quickly thought I'd pull up the stat differentials, because it is kind of inexplicable how well this Forest team have done this season. And again, not to try and downplay what they've done this year, because they've won the points, they're sitting third, they thoroughly deserve it. But when you actually dig deeper into the stats, they've scored 40 goals this year. On expected goals, they're up. They should have scored 38. So Chris Wood's been in scintillating form. He's putting away everything that he probably shouldn't be putting away so far this year. So that's one thing. Sells in goals been superb as well. They should have conceded 32 goals. They've only conceded 27. If you look at the expected points for Forest this season, they're massively outperforming there. They've got 47 points, but on XG, on expected points, they should have just 36 points, which is actually exactly what Fulham have. And Fulham are the second worst performing for expected points this season, based on all the factors that get put into coming up with these stats. Fulham should actually have 41 points and be sitting 4th in the league so far this season. As it is, those last-minute last-minute disappointing results we've had, dropping points here and there. It does feel like this could have been our season, and maybe that's why there's a little bit of animosity amongst the group towards Forest, because it feels like that should be us. And we just have missed those opportunities over the last couple of years, I'd say, to actually be in that position and push forward. And you feel like if we had ourselves up in third place at the moment, there'd be a lot more pressure on the Khans, or maybe the pressure actually gets lifted off the Khans, and all of a sudden money starts to be invested into the transfer market, because you look at it and go, European football. As it is, I actually think we're not ready to make that investment. It's too big a risk, and I'm actually kind of happy that we're slow playing it in a way, because I think if we made Europe this season, we'd have to invest an extreme amount of money. I don't think our squad is actually ready to play in Europe next season and comfortably survive in the league. And if you look across the last 4 or 5 years, I think I talked about it in the Discord, the teams who have managed to just sort of sneak into Europe have had terrible seasons after that. You look at a team like West Ham, for example, who are really struggling this season off the back of European adventures over the last couple of years.
But I don't
your
actually, I don't get that. You can't crawl across a chasm, right? If you make Europe, you're in, and you have to spend. Otherwise, you will have a big problem, and it's probably going to derail your Premier League season as well. So I don't think there's any choice. But, I don't really understand what you mean by crawling your way there, because if you make Europe, you've got to spend. If you're within touching distance of Europe and you've got the money, then you should spend if you're ambitious.
I'd also add to that I don't think it's as risky as you're making out, personally. I think we have the foundation for a Premier League team. That it's not like, when we got promoted and you had to completely overhaul the squad to try and to stay up. We're now on that sort of next tier where we've got the foundation of a team that got us into the top half of the table. Now we just need to add bits of quality. So for me, adding that, 30 goals. Sorry, I'm a bit excited. 15 to 20 goals a season striker. That real tricky winger that can make things happen. Hopefully Smith Rowe comes on his own and basically comes into his own and becomes that number 10 that we want him to be. But because we've already got, say, Anderson Bassey, I would say that is a solid centre-back partnership that wouldn't need to be touched. I think we've got Robinson, if we can keep him, as one of the best left-backs in Europe. We would only need to be adding potentially... I would even say Tete is fantastic if we can keep him fit. That you'd probably only need to really bring in that central midfield maestro. You'd probably need to bring in a striker and a really tricky winger and potentially goalkeeper, and then sort of fill in the gaps. But the players that we've got at the moment, your Lukic, your Berger, your sort of Wilsons and so on, Iwobi even. When you bring in that star player, they will become sort of the backup players. And then suddenly you've got a really strong squad depth, because these players which, when we look at it now, the team that played against Wigan, with talking about, Pereira, Harrison Reed was our midfield maestro for, I think, under sort of Parker and even early Silver days. So it's just that transition of, you were our main player. Now we're bringing in someone with such higher quality to take us to that next level that you now sort of fall down the pecking order. But you will be playing at a higher level. So, when we need fresh legs in the Europa League latter stages, because those games come thick and fast, then those players who will be dropping out, I'm looking at the Andreas Pereira in this situation, will get game time and they will have to come in and do their part. So I think we're in a bit of a good position. I think it's just getting those targets right and actually finding the right players that can take us to that level. And I don't think it's really that risky at all, really.
I actually think there's another interesting point here that I said 4. I'd love 4 players. Give me 6 if you're feeling generous. But I reckon 4 really, high quality players, and midfield, maybe a winger, love another striker. But I'm just wondering whether maybe leveraging a little bit off what Kish at Cottage Tactico just commented on, very smart observation, about the way in which Forest have actually recruited and the way in which Silver have recruited, always looking for proven Premier League quality players that ensure that his system works, but aren't necessarily as dynamic, or we don't have lots of different ways to change a game in a short period of time. And I'm just wondering whether there are some sleepers in the current squad, maybe ESR, surround him with even more quality on the wings. Maybe he lights up. It's a kind of Willian effect that when you inject him into the squad, playing those really clever balls, the Brazilians just go to another level. And there could be something in that. And maybe the foundation is really better set than we even think it is, that we can really ignite something with a fewer number of players. I'm not suggesting it's not going to be many tens of millions to find these 3 or 4 next level players, but it's probably not that many players to make a very big difference. I suspect you probably still have to have more in terms of just numbers if we start playing European football on top of that. But in terms of quality, I don't think we're that far away from it.
I agree. I think quality-wise, we're not far away. But the problem is actually when it comes to a European competition is quantity. And I had a quick look through the squad. I reckon we need to turn over 7 players out of the current squad of 25 realistically to actually have a successful European campaign alongside a successful Premier League season. And it's those players who came up through the Championship. So you're talking your Harrison Reed, Tom Cairney, Carlos Vinicius. Reece Nelson will probably go back to Arsenal at the end of his loan, replace Bender. And then you're talking about basically filling the gaps with those youth players who are coming through, like Goddo and Josh King, who are great players, but you can't really rely on them to play 10, 15 games in a season, which is kind of what you need when you're going and playing 40, 50. Well, if you have the European competition, which is now laid out with you guaranteed 8 games, plus a Premier League season of 38, plus at least probably 3 in each cup, you're talking about playing 60-odd games for the season if you want to progress in any of those cup competitions. Yep. You need a deep squad at that point. And I think Fulham actually have a pretty deep Premier League squad. But if you want to go to the next level, and also, like we want to compete in Europe, but we also want to qualify for Europe again the next season. And I feel like if we qualified for Europe at the end of this season, the turnover required to sustain that level is almost too big. And what you want is at the end of this season, maybe we don't qualify for Europe. Not saying I don't want to qualify for Europe, because of course I do, but if we didn't qualify for Europe, you want to see 4 players come in to replace 4 of those squad players. So let's say you replace Carlos Vinicius, Harrison Reed, Tom Cairney and Stephen Bender. Add some proper depth now, and maybe you replace those 4 with actual first-team starters, and then you get people like Lukic dropping to the bench behind them and Bernd Leno dropping to the bench, and all of a sudden your rotation options are your first team from last season or the season before, and that's what we need to get to. When I say crawling, I don't mean doing it stupidly and going too slowly, but I think taking your time to build squad depth and squad strength is kind of important here for sustainability. And so that's why I do understand that way of doing it. I would love to do what Forest did and just all of a sudden go and just sign 20-odd players across 2 seasons and spend hundreds of millions and somehow get away with it. But
the thing is, Jack, you're right. That's very sensible. But Silva is actually, I think he's good enough if you back him, not just by players that you think are great from a Tony Khan perspective, or that you think are bargains, but you back Silva in the kind of player that he wants. I think he's good enough to actually assimilate a number of players quite quickly.
I don't think the assimilation's the issue. I don't think signing players and getting them to play in the style's the issue. I think, firstly, the amount of money you have to spend to bring in the quality that we're hoping for. You have to spend minimum 20 million on each one of those players. So you're spending minimum probably 200 million in the next transfer window if you want to actually have a decent, deep squad for a European campaign. And I just don't see that happening, and I don't see that as a smart way to run a football club either. I reckon we'd be close on FFP to be able to spend that much, but to do that, you probably have to sell Robinson and Pereira, and then you open up 2 more slots that have to be filled properly again.
Yeah.
At the moment, like you say, we're a couple of positions away from having a really good, strong first team. The depth might not quite be there, but a couple of smart signings and spend decent money on a couple of good players, and then see how we go at the end of that season. And maybe that at the end of next season is when you aim to qualify for Europe, and then you can push from there and sign 4 really good squad backup players who can also challenge for the first team. Like it's confusing the way you do it, and there's lots of different ways to do it. I'm kind of happy with us not rushing it, if that makes sense. And I'd rather see us do it in a more sustainable fashion. I know you probably think a little bit differently.
I think you've actually done a therapy session on yourself and you've set your own expectations, and now you have no frustrations in your life, and life is very calm for you because you're at peace with the way it's going to be. Because the truth of it is, even if we had 200 million to spend, God forbid 80 to spend, Tony'd rather have 12 new wrestlers.
Well, the truth of it is, with FFP, you just can't do that unless you want to break the rules,
No.
and I just don't feel like they are willing to do that. You look at the Forest owner, and he's definitely a bloke who's willing to break a few rules. Let's be honest. So yeah, look, it's an interesting one, but let's get back to the game itself rather than mulling over if Fulham can get a good enough squad to make Europe. Skibby, how do you see Fulham winning this one? Last time we played them, Fulham had 60% possession. We were fortunate that Gibbs White wasn't playing, and Forest did some weird rotations with their squad. But do you see an avenue for Fulham to actually get 3 points here at the Cottage?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, like I said, the problems I saw in that Brighton game was there was just no protection of that defence, and there was just so much room in front of the defence or between the defence and midfield. So I think that game is just a no-brainer for me of Berger and Lukic to come in and basically solidify that area and close out Gibbs White. I think Lukic could easily or even Berger, to be fair, could do a job on Gibbs White and just stop him from getting the ball. And he's very lightweight. He wouldn't be up for the physicality of Berger and Lukic. So I think that's where you got to stop them. I think we're very good at the moment of preventing wing play. We saw that against Newcastle at home, and even the second half of the Newcastle game, where Anthony Gordon and I'm going to forget. I think it wasn't Willock, it was Murphy. Were running quite well in that first half, and I think as soon as Castagna kind of pulled up his stocks and understood the assignment, he suddenly became very competent defensively. And I think as long as you can stop the ball coming into Chris Wood, and if you stop Gibbs White, then I think definitely we've got a very good chance. And we're probably a better team away than we are at home, but I do think that's still going to work in our favour, because when you look at Forest's other sort of results, before they annihilated Brighton, they lost 5-0 away to Bournemouth. And we've played Bournemouth. Yeah, they looked okay. But I think this was also the time where Bournemouth had lost both their key strikers, Evan Nilsson and the other chap whose name I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, they're leaky. From what I saw from that Bournemouth game, you can get at them, you can hurt them. And I think they ride their luck at times. And I think if we're able to get more men around the striker, in whether it be Muniz or Jimenez, most likely Jimenez, I think that's where we can hurt them. With Iwobi having pot shots, and potentially Smith Rowe being able to sort of get into the box. What we can work well is that kind of triangle where I haven't seen it enough recently, but I'd like to see it more. And I think that's probably where we can potentially hurt Forest is that sort of small triangle on the left where Robinson either gets in or Smith Rowe, or allowing Iwobi to cut inside and curl on with his right foot. I think that's definitely going to be the area. They're going to be against an old Fulham boy of Ola Aina, who's been very impressive this year. I think he's been probably one of their unsung heroes, if I'm honest. When you watch him, he's
good player,
very athletic. I mean, I'd love him right now.
Best mate to the Iwobi as well. Issues.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he would have been fantastic, but I think there's opportunity here for sure. I think it's just being able to shut down the wings and stop Gibbs White from playing, as I said. I think they're definitely going to be the sort of the key battles, and if we want to get anything out of this game.
An interesting question to pose to you here off the back of that. I had a very quick look at the last time we played Forest, and Fulham made 40 clearances in that game, which is quite a massive number, really. I think we usually average about 15 to 20. Do you think this is a case for Diop to start, maybe with that added height and his ability in the air? We've seen him do it multiple times, and just he's got this ability to just always be in the right place at the right time for balls coming into the box, and knowing how physical Chris Wood is and how good he is in the air. Do you think maybe there's a chance Diop sneaks into the starting 11?
Yeah, he took the thought out of my, not the thought, I had the thought, you took the words out of my mouth. Definitely, although the problem is an on-form Anderson, I'd probably still prefer him, but he's not in great form at the moment, and I was hoping it was a short-term problem, but it's looking like it's not turning around that quickly, and I just wonder how fully fit he is, actually. And given Wood's height, I did wonder whether we may make that switch and use Diop. Mm-hmm. I actually think I feel very comfortable that Berger and Lukic are actually in very good form at the moment, and I think they can more than hold their own and control the middle of the park. I'm not too bothered. I think Skibby laid it out very, very well in terms of what we've got to do on the wings. But I just wonder whether that is the tweak to bring Diop in to counter Wood's ascendancy in the air. He's a big bloke.
Mm. Yeah, I think we need to do something, and I think that feels like the rotation that we kind of should be making in this instance.
Particularly that Anderson's not in great form.
Yeah, I just think even if Anderson was in okay form, it just feels like it kind of makes sense. Like it's Chris Wood is obviously their key player and their biggest threat, and Diop is quite clearly our best player aerially. So match them up. Tactically, it seems to make sense. It's just about if Silva sees, I guess, like you said, Anderson's probably the one who drops out if Diop comes in. Does Silva see Anderson as such a big outlet from the back that we can't afford to drop him? I don't know. And
I think he probably does.
Forest do give up a lot of possession very regularly, so we will see Anderson getting on the ball and having the ball at his feet quite regularly throughout the day, I would have thought. And maybe it just feels a little too risky to actually give up that outlet just to try and shut down Chris Wood. I think Anderson should have it in him to be able to handle Chris Wood. It's just a matter of if he actually can on the day. I mean, guys,
tactically, if you put it like that, I think if you put it like that, you give up that outlet that Anderson gives you, even if he's 20% off successful completed long passes or passes out of defence, it's probably still worth playing him because he hasn't been terrible defensively. It's his passing that's actually let him down. One other thing I was going to say is I want to be over, because we know that if we've got, as Skibby mentioned, if you've got Smith Rowe turning up in the box like he can from time to time when he just turns up for a game, that can be so decisive, whether it's Raul or Muniz, with him alongside them, scrapping for those little diving headers and just turning up at the back post, something like that. It can make all the difference, but I've probably lost hope, really, that I can depend on that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't do it. I just don't believe it, that he's going to do it next week.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. It's we want it so much, and it just doesn't seem to be forthcoming at this stage. But let's hope that this is a game that he turns up for, and we can actually utilize what he offers, and we start to see some of those triangles that Kish has always told us about at Cottage Tactico. So Skibby, I'll push you first for a prediction for this game. How do you see this one panning out?
I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a 2-1 Fulham win. I do feel that there are gaps in Forest and they do ride their luck at times. But like you said, they do score quite often. But so I think it'll be close. But yeah, 2-1 Fulham win.
Love it. Confident. Love it. Dad, your prediction?
Yeah, nothing unique about this. I'm going to say 2-1 as well, because I actually think that's what's going to happen. I think we are unfortunately still very vulnerable to leaking a goal. I don't see a clean sheet, and but I do think that we're capable of scoring a couple, probably one from one of our strikers and one from the wings, or maybe from a corner. Who knows?
I'm going for a drubbing. I'm saying 3-0 Fulham. I feel like Forest are often all or nothing, and I just have this feeling that Marco has it over Nuno a little bit. And yeah, I just have this feeling that it's going to be a good day out. I think we'll actually see Muniz start off the back of his goals in the FA Cup. I just feel like you can't ignore Muniz at the moment. He's coming off the bench scoring goals. When he gets his opportunity to start, he's scoring goals. I think you have to reward that. And we've seen Silva do that with Wilson previously. I think it's time for Muniz to get his reward and get a start. And I feel like he's going to be really up for it and cause some issues for the Forest defence. I think I just feel like it's going to be our day. Maybe that's just me being incredibly hopeful, but I'm going 3-0 Fulham. Clip that, post it on Instagram and not on Instagram, on Twitter on Sunday when we're all celebrating the result. A few other predictions here. I see Jim saying 3-2 Muniz Chaos Theory. I think that's almost picked up the title of our podcast if we do get a win on the weekend. So, guys, thank you for joining today. It's been good to talk this one through. It's going to be a tricky game on the weekend. I'm looking forward to watching this one though, because I feel like it's going to be a bit of a tactical chess game where we just hope that we come out on top. And I feel like Marco is going to be preparing them well for this. And this it's a bit of a chance to prove ourselves, I think, because like we've talked about a little bit, Forest are in the position that I think Fulham fans want to be in, and Fulham fans almost feel like we deserve to be in a way. And it'd be nice to see us get one over Forest and actually do the double over them this season, especially as they're flying high. As Colm says, please do hit a like on the way out. I hate saying that. I feel like a proper YouTuber at that point, but really appreciate all the people who continue to support the podcast. So please subscribe, please like, please share whenever you see our posts. We really do appreciate the support, and it continues to help people find the podcast and find us on all platforms. So we do appreciate that. Skibby, thanks for joining today, mate.
No, thank you very much for having me. And hopefully we live up to the hype that we've now painted for ourselves. I know that on the last sort of After Dark, myself, Mary and Dave didn't have the best. Well, the last one I was on, when we all predicted Man United wins for Fulham against Man United, didn't quite go to plan. So hopefully this one goes a bit better than those previous predictions.
Fingers are firmly crossed for this one. Dad, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hope your Valentine's Day goes well, Skibby.
Yeah, I'm all ready. So hopefully I won't get in trouble for anything.
Fingers crossed. You got 24 hours to survive, so good luck. Or 12 hours, I guess, till midnight. Thank you again to everyone who's joined in the live stream, everyone who continues to support. As I said, we really do appreciate it. And as always, come on, you Whites.